Epilogue. Born on July 4th, 1892, in a log cabin in the small town of Demopolis, Alabama, Arthur George Gaston grew from the confines of the Jim Crow South to become one of the greatest entrepreneurs of the 20th century. Despite growing up amid the darkness of segregation, Gaston always found hope and opportunity. His uncanny ability to craft business solutions around the needs of the Black community helped him to create a network of companies that employed and empowered a generation of African American entrepreneurs, building a multi-million-dollar empire that included a construction company, business college, funeral home, insurance company, bank, and the motel that still bears his name. Even though he disagreed with many tactics of the civil rights movement, Gaston played a quiet but pivotal role in negotiating to end the violence in Birmingham in 1963, providing funding for civil rights leaders and frontline activists, and offering advice to icons such as Martin Luther King Jr., Fred Shuttlesworth, Ralph Abernathy, and more. Throughout his 102 years of life, Gaston always sought to find ways to positively impact his city of Birmingham. His founding of the A.G. Gaston Boys and Girls Club in 1966 proved to be one of the most powerful moments to his legacy. From humble beginnings to groundbreaking entrepreneurship, A.G. Gaston's story is a timeless beacon that ignites the ambition of dreamers and inspires generations of all ages to redefine what is possible. Chapter 8. Crisis in Birmingham. I heard the downstairs window crash as the rock struck and went to my own office window. Outside, I saw 4,000 strange and angry faces. Oh, my people. Under the sunny April sky, Negro demonstrators and Birmingham police were raging a fierce battle. Hordes of Negro youth streamed from the 16th Street Baptist Church into the lines of policemen waiting in Kelly Ingram Park. They broke the police line, dashing for City Hall. Firemen manning hoses on the edge of the park pushed them back with heavy streams of water. People turned and ran, some stumbling and falling when the hard streams of water hit them. On the fringes, they yelled abuses at the firemen and police and danced in the water. Fire trucks and policemen, accompanied by city riot cars, attempted to clear the streets. Policemen swung their nightsticks, firemen sprayed their hoses, and police dogs poked their noses from police cars, waiting for the command to attack. Negroes hurled bricks and jagged missiles into the ranks of firemen and policemen. I watched streams of water turn on the Baptist church and then on our Gaston building, completed 3 years earlier. Below me, a glass door shattered. Some of the demonstrators were only children. It was 1963, the 100th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation, and racial tension had been building toward this moment for the past 10 years. When in 1954, the U.S. Supreme Court rendered a decision outlawing segregation in education, there was in Alabama open and bitter denunciation from white quarters. There followed a noticeable upsurge in the construction of fine, well-equipped schools for Negroes. Most Negroes interpreted this as an effort to keep them satisfied with their own schools and to lessen the possibility of their seeking to enter white schools. Every year brought new conflicts. In 1956, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People was restrained by court order from further activity in the state of Alabama. To take its place, under the leadership of some of Birmingham's prominent Negro ministers, the Alabama Christian Movement for Human Rights was organized. The Reverend Fred L. Shuttlesworth, president, stepped up civil rights activities and led the group into defiance of practically all of Birmingham's segregated practices. Segregated air, railway and train terminals, seating on city buses, interstate and intrastate transportation facilities, restrooms, drinking fountains, elevators, restaurants, churches, all segregated facilities were challenged by the movement. Similar groups were organized in other Alabama cities. The Montgomery Improvement Association, headed by the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., solidified the Negroes in that community and conducted an effective boycott of buses and businesses. In Tuskegee, organization of the Civic Association grew from unrest of the Negro majority because of their inability to register to vote. The Negro population outnumbered the white 4-1, but the white minority was in control of local government. Many from the staff of Tuskegee Institute, holders of advanced degrees, including PhDs, failed to pass the voter registration test. With the passage of the 1957 Civil Rights Act and establishment of the United Commission on Civil Rights, the Negroes of Tuskegee launched a voter registration drive. Registrars and officials did not alter their stand. In retaliation, Tuskegee Negroes organized a business boycott, many driving to Opelika and Montgomery for their purchases. The boycott was successful. Numbers of white businesses failed. Then came the famed gerrymander, the Alabama legislature redrawing the boundaries of Tuskegee to exclude Tuskegee Institute and other colored sections from the city. Even though Tuskegee Negroes had an income in excess of $10 million, most of them were in debt to local merchants and banks. Some had tired of the long trips to other towns to purchase goods and were seeking ways to finance their own businesses. Lending institutions in Tuskegee, rather than supporting them, were pressuring them for outstanding loans. I had addressed the Tuskegee Civic Association. While frustration was acute, I assured the members that our company was willing to take up any mortgage where undue pressure was being applied, and to advance mortgage money for Negro businesses and homes. We advanced over $100,000 to A.C. Bulls to open the ABC supermarket. At the same time, I urged these highly literate Negroes to live within their means, to save, to support their own businesses, to qualify to vote, and so to change the image of the community. In Birmingham, the movement made its first bid for school desegregation in the fall of 1957. Violence followed. The Reverend Shuttlesworth, his wife, and his daughter were hospitalized. His home and church had been bombed. He was jailed more than once on charges stemming from his civil rights activity. And now, with the observance of the anniversary of the emancipation as an incentive, the Alabama Christian Movement for Human Rights had called on Dr. King. Martin Luther had gone from his successful organizing of Montgomery Negroes to Atlanta to form the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, a confederation of smaller groups, such as Birmingham's movement. In early 1963, leaders from King's SCLC began to hold strategy meetings with leaders of the movement to eliminate all legally accepted racial segregation and discrimination in Birmingham. Meetings were held in the A.G. Gaston Motel. Now, through the window, I saw 3 sprawling Negroes swept half a block down the street on waves of fire-hose water. The shouting grew louder and louder. So many, so young. In spite of all the strife and difficulty, opportunities for Negroes had increased during the 1950s. A 1957 survey revealed that Negro family income in Birmingham was the highest in the Southeast. The number of families earning over $4,000 had increased more than 300% between 1950 and 1957, when almost half the Negroes in the city owned their own homes. New apartments had been constructed and subdivisions built. Negroes were building fast homes, churches, hospitals, businesses. At the same time, the white community was providing better schools, libraries, and other public facilities for Negroes. Negro businesses were able to absorb more and more qualified workers. By 1963, the A.G. Gaston Enterprises alone provided jobs for more than 500 people, with an annual payroll of over $1.5 million. Outside, a Negro demonstrator was hit with a policeman's stick. Another hurled a rock at a policeman's head. The city was in chaos, plagued not only by the racial disturbance and accompanying economic difficulties, but by problems of government. If a city ever needed political stability, Birmingham needed it now. Instead, we had two governments, each challenging the other. For almost 50 years, Birmingham city government had been a board of commissioners, a president, and 2 associates. In 1962, dissatisfaction with this form led to adoption of the mayor-council system. Even though the voters of the city had elected to replace the city commission with the mayor-council, there were those who challenged the constitutionality of the election. During these terrible days, Commissioner Bull Connor sometimes rode armored cars into the riot areas. The thought that he might be near enraged the Negroes who hated him. It seemed somehow impossible that the sun could be shining on the scene outside. A boy, about 14, poked a stick at a leashed police dog. The dog snarled. The policeman took a step forward. I turned heavily from my window. For almost 60 years, I had been a resident of this city, had been building and growing with it for the past 40. I felt a vital part of everything that was happening. Slowly, sadly, I turned on the dictaphone and finished the statement I had promised for the national press. I regret the absence of continued communication between the white and Negro leadership in our city, and the inability of the white merchants and power structure of our community to influence the city fathers to establish an official line of communication between the races in our city. This condition, along with the many unsolved bombings and other incidents causing unfavorable publicity for Birmingham, has made this city a very attractive target for the present unhappy situation in which we now find ourselves. There is no doubt in my mind, or in the mind of any of us, concerning the aspirations of the Negro citizens in this community and throughout the country. We want freedom and justice, and we want to be able to live and work with dignity in all endeavors where we are qualified. We want also to contribute our share for the progress of our community. I believe we have capable and intelligent leadership among the colored people in the community, competent and able to work towards bringing the hopes, dreams, and aspirations of the Negro citizen to reality. The problems that Birmingham now faces were faced by other great southern cities. And to the credit of these great cities, which lie within a short distance of us, the local leaders of these communities got their minds, talents, and energies together and solved their respective problems. Today, Birmingham stands on the threshold of transition, and I feel it will be a transition to greatness. The sails have been set for the city, and it is now incumbent upon the leadership of this community to chart its destiny. I, therefore, call upon all the citizens of Birmingham to work harmoniously and together in a spirit of brotherly love to solve the problems of our city, giving due recognition to the local colored leadership among us. May came. The riots continued. The nation pointed its finger at Birmingham. Police action did not lessen. In the early morning hours of May 12th, the Inslee home of Reverend A.D. King and the A.G. Gaston Motel were bombed. Within minutes after the explosion, hundreds of Negroes gathered at both scenes. Aroused Negroes milled about the streets. A dozen policemen came to control the situation. Automobiles with white occupants were stopped, rocked, and overturned. Windows were broken, and many occupants injured. Light-complexioned Negroes passing through the area had to quickly identify themselves as Negroes or brothers, or suffer the same fate as whites. There was fear in the faces of policemen, rage in the faces of the mob. Ambulances were speeding the injured to hospitals. Negroes began yelling for Bull Connor. "We'll kill him!" they screamed. Soon, fires were flaring in businesses and in houses owned by white people. Firemen were kept from fighting the blazes by enraged Negroes, who damaged water hoses and peppered the trucks with flying missiles. A 28-block area was sealed off, and every available law enforcement officer was drawn into duty. Off-duty policemen were ordered to report to work. Local forces were joined by officers from other areas of the state. Negro people and policemen were injured that early May morning, many of them seriously. It was Mother's Day. Over the radio and through the press, I issued an appeal for demonstrators to cease recruiting children to join their ranks, and with a number of Negro leaders, made this statement. We feel that, under the Constitution of the United States of America, the rights granted to every citizen are justly ours as contributing and law-abiding citizens in this community. We have never asked for any special privileges because of our racial or religious identity. We are not asking for any at the moment. We are appealing to the people of goodwill in this community, people who believe in human rights and dignity, to hear our case and save Birmingham. We call upon the city officials to appoint immediately a biracial committee which will be charged with the responsibility of looking objectively and boldly at the problems in this community where race is involved. It is our general conviction that only in this matter, with official sanction, can Birmingham become truly the Magic City. The current struggle in our community is an expression of the uttered and unexpressed deep yearnings in the heart of every Negro in this community. This struggle is not one of strife, but of striving to say to our friends and neighbors of whatever race and creed, let us live together in human dignity as American citizens and sons of God. The demonstrations were halted in the hope that Negro and white leaders were going to be able to negotiate a peaceful settlement. During the conferences, at which federally dispatched conciliators listened in, Negro and white business leaders came to terms which were acceptable to both. Birmingham entered a summer of uneasy peace. Many of the people arrested during the demonstrations were still in jail. Bond for their release was set at $237,000. I was asked to guarantee $160,000 of the bail money, which I gladly did. Martin Luther King was also in jail. Here, he wrote the moving letter from a Birmingham jail. The question is not whether we will be extremists, But what kind of extremists we will be? Will we be extremists for hate? Or will we be extremists for love? Will we be extremists for preservation of injustice? Or will we be extremists for the cause of justice? Let us all hope that the dark cloud of racial prejudice will soon pass away, and the deep fog of misunderstanding will be lifted from our fear-drenched communities. And in some not too distant tomorrow, the radiant stars of love and brotherhood will shine over our great nation with all their scintillating beauty. While Martin Luther was confined, more militant splinter groups of the movement were whipping the Negroes into an ugly mood. I put up $2,500 bail and got King out. He was needed to calm and control the colored community. I felt his continued imprisonment would further agitate my people. During these May demonstrations, Al Hibbler, the blind singer, famous for his rhythm and blues, was scheduled to give a concert in Birmingham. Sponsors widely publicized his coming appearance at the L.R. Hall Auditorium of our new building. The $1.5 million A.G. Gaston building had been completed in 1960 to house our growing enterprises. The Booker T. Washington Insurance Company, which was considered the parent of the other businesses, had continued to grow and absorb a number of small burial societies and insurance companies. Before we knew it, the company was thought of as big business. Unexpected sales began to come our way, and we were offered bargains in real estate and other sound investments. These transactions have required more personnel and more space. In the modern building, which provided facilities for our insurance company, business college, Vulcan Realty and Investment Corporation, and Citizens Federal Savings and Loan Association, we had included a spacious auditorium for the use of community organizations, as well as the public affairs, sponsored by our own organization. One important stipulation for community use of this L.R. Hall Auditorium was that any rental must have my final approval. Sponsors of the well-advertised Hibbler appearance had made a major oversight. They failed to contract for the use of the auditorium. On the day of the concert, they realized their mistake and hastily tried to make a reservation. Unfortunately, I was out of the city, and my associates could not give permission. Already militant Negroes were criticizing me for arranging bail for demonstrators, especially Martin Luther King. They argued that I should have let them stay in jail until the city decided to release them, boasting that hell would have been raised if King's confinement had continued. When the Hibbler concert failed to be held in our building, as advertised, I drew fresh fire from the Negro community. I was branded an Uncle Tom. It disturbed me that my people could so mistake my motives. I was not condoning the white people in their treatment of Negroes. Neither was I acting out of fear of them. I simply felt that the demonstrators had made their point to the world, and there was no need to prolong their suffering by permitting them to remain in jail. I was convinced it was now time to use the conference table instead of the streets to try to settle differences. If wanting to spare children, save lives, and bring peace was Uncle Tomism, then I wanted to be a super Uncle Tom. During the tense, hot summer, I had even more than my usual number of invitations to address influential groups all across the country, most of whom represented the power structure among Negroes in America. I believe many of them expected me to tell the Birmingham story, but that story had been given such wide publicity, I did not feel called upon to repeat it. I felt I had something much more constructive to say. Each man must do his own thing, and I wanted to help prepare the American Negro for the new role he was winning. As a layman and a businessman, with many of my activities closely associated with business and commerce, I am naturally concerned with the Negro's advancement economically, as well as his social and political advancement. As we move forward toward total first-class citizenship, it is in that vein that I would like to discuss with you the Negro's economic potential. I have been told that Negroes earn approximately $20 billion a year. And as we move further into higher income brackets, brought about by upgrading from lower paying jobs and qualifying for positions heretofore denied the Negro, this figure will increase. Much credit goes to the NAACP, the Urban League, and other agencies that have given leadership in attaining social and political rights. However, I note a conspicuous absence of leadership for our people regarding the Negro's economic potential and civic responsibility. Of this $20 billion coming into the hands, or should I say, coming through the hands, of our people each year, too much of this vast amount of economic strength is passed along too quickly. Our economic potential should equal our civil rights advancement. A first-class broke man will find it very difficult to use his civil rights to the fullest. The Negro cannot afford to get lost in the full economy of this country and only appear important in the area of consumers. We must be production pioneers and develop businesses catering solely to the Negroes, other than the liquor business. I am not saying money is everything a Negro needs to fit into his American democracy as a first-class citizen and avoid getting lost in the total economy. I am saying, however, that honesty, integrity, the proper use of the ballot, and assumption of his responsibility as a law-abiding citizen, sensitivity to his civic responsibility to his community, and contribution to the worthy charitable causes in his community are things not likely to be credited to the man on the beggars list. We cannot fight and beg from those we fight at the same time. As we win our freedom and first-class citizenship, we must be willing and prepared to pay the cost of maintaining it. Fundamentals are going begging. How many Negroes have lost a home but paid for the furniture? Have owned a $4,000 automobile but couldn't pay tuition for a son or daughter in college? Have spent $400 on a party but wouldn't give $10 to a civic cause? Have lived high on the hog but died and left a widow and children with mortgages, debts, broken hearts, and no life insurance? We must tell the Negro, by words and example, that only the wise and prudent use of his earning will solidify his gains in the field of civil and human rights. Our message to our people must always be to save a part of whatever is earned, invest in a home, build a life-insured estate, encourage our children to stay in school and get all the training they can get, and spend our money as nearly as possible where Negroes work in substantial numbers and in upgraded positions. I challenge you to adopt this as a program of action in an effort to move our people forward. If we fail, we suffer. Our people suffer. Our children suffer. But if we show courage to lead the Negro in directing his economic potential and accepting his civic responsibility, then generations yet unborn will rise up and call us blessed. I was glad during those trying months of 1963, when the new mayor-council government, by now ratified, and white leaders worked so hard at the council table with Negro leaders to keep the city quiet, that I had the maturity of age. I was reminded of the colored soldiers returning to civilian life in 1919. Many of us from the rural South and many who had been to Paris. We felt we had come of age, and America owed us a place in society. With the Negro leadership now prevailing in America, especially in some of the small, more militant groups, a worse conflagration than was currently happening could have been sparked off. The personalities of radical leaders of today were not responsible for their popularity. It was the collective indignation of thousands who had returned home after a glimpse of better conditions. The Negro's position in 1919 was much worse than in 1963. But such leaders were not around. If someone had prodded me to demand many of the things I assumed would come to me naturally, I might have been led into some unfortunate actions. But I had learned through the years that nothing justified disrespect for law and order. Such harmony as had been achieved exploded in the fall when the first effort to integrate white schools came. 5 Negro children were scheduled to integrate 3 Birmingham schools. The home of Arthur Shores, the attorney who had assisted in obtaining our citizens' federal charter, was bombed. School officials appealed to all teachers to preserve law and order. In a special television program, Mayor Albert Boutwell and other civic leaders appealed to the people of Birmingham, right-thinking, right-living men and women of both races, to maintain peace. 2 little Negro boys, brothers, eluded angry white demonstrators milling around the front of the building and registered in what had been, for 60 years, an all-white grammar school. At all 3 schools, hundreds of demonstrators walked up and down the street chanting, 2, 4, 6, 8, we don't want to integrate. Automobiles, bearing Confederate flags and anti-integration insignia, cruised the neighborhoods. In Tuscaloosa, Governor George C. Wallace made his famous stand in the schoolhouse door at the University of Alabama, after which federal officials quietly proceeded to integrate the school. The Birmingham Board of Education ordered to close the 3 schools involved in integration. State troopers arrived. Attorney Shore's home was bombed again. A petition to delay execution of the federal court order desegregating the schools was denied by a 3-judge appeals court panel. Demonstrations continued throughout the city. Stoning of automobiles was on the increase. Street disorders left 1 Negro man dead and 20 other persons hurt in clashes with police. Bitterness was intense. In these chaotic days, there was one cheerful episode. Minnie and I had received an invitation from President Kennedy to a formal state dinner for the King and Queen of Afghanistan. That an uneducated boy from Demopolis could now be recognized in such a way was almost more than I could believe. I had been, of course, a long-time contributor to the Democratic Party. But I could not help wondering if the invitation had been an accident. I read the invitation over and over, showed it to friends. The more I looked at it, the more convinced I was that America was the greatest country in the world. tragic events were taking place in this heartbreaking social revolution, still, the potential for individual growth was unlimited. If I, a Negro with little education and no influence, could progress from a black belt farm in Alabama to a seat at a White House dinner, then anybody could. Any American who did not build a purposeful, satisfying life for himself just didn't have it on the inside. Minnie and I were, as usual, the first passengers to check in for our flight. Everyone always teased me about being early, but I never made the mistake of believing a meeting, a party, an airplane, or the world would wait on me. The dinner was a grand affair. I'd never been in the presence of a national figure who showed the warmth of President John F. Kennedy. After introductions, he greeted us by name. While he exchanged a few pleasantries, his ruddy, agreeable face was attentive, as if we were the only people in the room. Then solemnly, he said, "I'm so sorry, Mr. Gaston, to hear of the racial disturbances in your Birmingham." Minnie and I returned to Birmingham Saturday night, still excited. This was certainly one of the most gratifying experiences we had ever had. We piled in bed and probably smiled in our sleep. I woke to hear Minnie groaning softly. She was dreaming. I thought hazily and returned to deep sleep. "Arthur! Arthur!" Her frightened screams were coming from downstairs. I started running for her, and as I reached the stairway, I realized the house was full of smoke. She was in the living room, standing beside a burned lampshade, and tears rolled down her terrified face. The walls were blackened by smoke from the smoldering furniture. The draperies and rug were melted. Both were fortunately non-flammable synthetics, and the fire had burned itself out. "It's a miracle we're not dead," Minnie sobbed. When the police came, they discovered a second firebomb had struck the side of the house, scorching the white paint. The bombs appeared to be pint milk bottles with wicks stuck in kerosene. Minnie was desperately upset, although she managed to keep some composure. She explained to the police that several hours earlier she heard a car approaching the house. I looked out the window, and the car went back down the hill with its lights off. I wondered about it because visitors are supposed to call the house from the intercom system at the mailbox before driving up. But I didn't think it was important enough to report. I didn't hear anything else. Later, I woke up because my throat gave me trouble. I didn't smell smoke, but when I got up, I found the house was full of it. I kept wondering why our house had been bombed and which political faction was responsible. I had been accused by some in the white community of supporting the so-called radicals by providing motel accommodations and bond for civil rights demonstrators. At the same time, I was being criticized by leaders of the rights movement because of my conservatism, a charge stemming from newspaper statements. Was there a possibility that I was being attacked by the more militant Negro leadership or the Klan? I employed guards for the house around the clock, and I prepared a new statement for the press. "Please, stop making statements," some Negroes had been telling me. I suppose they thought I was rocking the boat with conservative statements. Now, a new group, friends concerned for my safety, began to beg me to keep silence. But violence was spreading. There were rumors that downtown Birmingham was to be blown up. Certainly, a word of common sense and caution was needed. Silence would be cowardice. I wrote a piece for the newspaper on responsible citizenship. As a native of Alabama and a tax-paying, first-class citizen of Birmingham and Jefferson County, as an employer of a large number of people whose total earnings are more than $1 million a year and with several million dollars invested in this area, I feel I am qualified to have a right to be concerned not only about myself or my businesses, but about the hundreds of employees and their families who are associated with me, as what affects the good name and economy of this community, good or bad, affects all of us who benefit from this community. I would hope that the line of communication recently established with the leaders of the white community would not be adversely affected by the present unrest, but instead strengthened and enlarged to give more Negroes an opportunity to participate in our city and county governments on all levels of which they are capable, including counsel and advice to foster goodwill and growth in the community. As a responsible citizen of Birmingham, I deplore the invasion of our schools to enlist students for demonstrations during school hours. I would recommend that steps be taken to institute workshops to train our young people in discipline, nonviolence, and good law-abiding citizenship. I support the right of peaceful protest and freedom of assembly when across-the-table conferences fail to achieve the goals. When all of these fail, demonstrations are inevitable. Demonstrations reflect the dissatisfaction of Negro and white citizens alike, but they should, at all times, be within the law. I do not condone violence or violation of the law on the part of anyone, and I am sure all responsible Negro citizens share this thought. The responsibility and conduct of our youth is first the responsibility of the parents and our local leadership. Rioting increased. Hatred grew more intense and more widespread, now affecting many people who had remained calm and moderate. During Sunday school, on the morning of September 15, the 16th Street Baptist Church was bombed. 4 children were killed. 17 persons were injured. Negroes went wild with the desire for revenge. Most doubted anyone would ever be brought to trial. They seemed to have renewed determination to take matters into their own hands, even if it did mean fighting well-equipped officers with bricks, bottles, and Molotov cocktails. Good people of the white community were stunned. Many of them, especially those who lived in the wealthy, over-the-mountain districts, had felt concerned but detached over the racial disturbances, believing they were responsible. They were the lunatic fringe of both races. Now, the white community began to realize that if extremists on both sides released all their fury on each other, Birmingham could quite literally be demolished. The situation was critical. Birmingham leaders begged an audience with President Kennedy and asked me to join the group. Before going to the White House, we met at a Washington hotel. All of us tense with worry. Federal troops, one of the men said. No. Let's don't ask the president for U.S. soldiers, I urged. We have to restore order some way. That's true, another agreed. Let us try to settle this without federal troops, I repeated. At the White House, the president amazed me by greeting me by name. He was famous for his remarkable memory, but I had not expected this. Mr. Gaston, I was certainly distressed to read that your house was bombed. I give you my sympathy. It must have been a bad shock for you and your wife. Again, the president had surprised me by being aware of an incident in Birmingham when the load of the whole nation was on his shoulders. He seemed very upset as the group discussed increasing tension in Birmingham. We talked of the rioters and police, of the bombings of homes and businesses, which were prompting insurance carriers to cancel Negroes' fire insurance policies. The president called in the Attorney General and one of his aides, Colonel Earl Blake. I repeated my conviction that we should not bring federal troops to Birmingham. I don't want to invade Alabama, he said gravely, but troops must be sent if the danger grows more acute. At home, the biracial committee feverishly attacked the task of bringing peace to Birmingham. In the next few weeks, progress was made. With that knowledge, I decided to take Minnie, who was still extremely nervous and upset from the shock of the bombing, to Hawaii. We returned, greatly refreshed, on November 23rd. As we checked into our San Francisco hotel, the desk clerk inquired, "You just flew in, Mr. Gaston? Then perhaps you haven't heard. The president has been assassinated."